On the 5th of May, 1945, on a cliff on the island of Okinawa, an American army was running for its life. The Japanese counterattack had broken them. Men were falling back to the ropes, scrambling down a 400-foot escarpment, leaving their wounded behind in the smoke. And one man walked the other way. He carried no rifle. He carried no pistol. He had never fired a shot in his life, and he never would. He walked back into the fire alone, found a broken man in the dirt, dragged him to the edge of the cliff, and lowered him down on a rope by hand. Then he turned around and went back for another and another. For 12 hours he did not stop, and every single time he thought he had nothing left, he said the same 7 words: "Lord, please help me get one more." His name was Desmond Doss, and he was born in Lynchburg, Virginia, in 1919, a skinny, gentle boy from a poor family. On the wall of his childhood home hung a cheap framed picture of the 10 Commandments. Beside each commandment was a small illustration, and beside the words, "Thou shalt not kill," was a drawing of Cain standing over the body of his brother Abel, a club in his hand. Desmond would stand in front of that picture for hours, and he would ask himself one question, over and over: how could a brother do that to a brother? Years later, that question stopped being an idea. His father, broken and drunk on the memories of the First World War, took hold of a pistol in a family fight. Young Desmond wrestled it away from him. He held the gun in his hands. He felt the weight of it, and he made a promise to God, standing right there, that he would never touch a weapon again as long as he lived. He was a teenager. He meant it for life. And in 3 years, the world would go to war. When Pearl Harbor burned, every young man in America was expected to pick up a rifle. Desmond Doss could have stayed home. He worked in a shipyard. The job carried a deferment. He was legally, comfortably, permanently exempt. He turned it down. Because here is the part everyone gets wrong about Desmond Doss. He was not a coward, and he was not a pacifist hiding from the war. He hated what Hitler and the Empire of Japan were doing. He wanted to serve. He wanted to be in it. He simply would not kill. He refused even to be called a conscientious objector. Objectors, he said, object to serving. He was, in his own words, a conscientious cooperator. He would go to the worst places on earth, unarmed, and he would carry men out of them. So he volunteered as a combat medic. He would run into the fire that everyone else was running out of, and he would do it with nothing in his hands but bandages. The United States Army did not know what to do with him, so it decided to break him. They started the day he arrived. His sergeant put a rifle in his hands. Doss put it down, refused a direct order, calmly, politely, and completely. So they made him a target. They gave him every filthy detail on the base. They marched him until he dropped. Men in his own barracks called him a coward to his face. They threw boots at him while he knelt to pray at night. One soldier told him, plainly, that when they got into combat, he would not be coming back, and it would not be the Japanese who did it. They beat him, and Desmond Doss never once named the men who did it. His officers tried to have him declared mentally unfit, a Section 8 discharge, a paper that would have followed him home and told everyone he was insane. He refused to sign. He would not work on Saturday, his Sabbath, so he took every dirty duty the other days instead and asked for nothing. Every single day they gave him a way out. Every single day he said no. Finally, the army stopped asking and put him on trial, court-martial, for refusing to bear arms. If they won, Desmond Doss would go to prison, a criminal, a disgrace, in the middle of a world war. He stood in that courtroom, a private nobody, against the United States Army, and he would not bend. He did not want to leave. He did not want a discharge. He wanted to go with his unit to the worst place they were going and save the men who had beaten him. And he was right. Legally, he was right. The law protected his refusal. The charges collapsed. The army lost. So they gave him what he asked for. They sent him to the Pacific unarmed. He served on Guam. He served on Leyte. He came back with 2 Bronze Stars, and men who had thrown boots at him began, quietly, to change their minds. And then, in the spring of 1945, the 77th Infantry Division was sent to a place the maps called the Maeda Escarpment. The soldiers called it Hacksaw Ridge. It was a wall of rock, 400 feet high, and the last 35 feet were sheer and vertical. The only way up was cargo nets thrown over the face. You climbed, hand over hand, exposed, and whatever was waiting at the top was waiting for you. At the top was one of the most heavily fortified positions of the entire war. Tunnels bored through the rock. Hidden machine guns, mortars ranged onto every inch of open ground, and a garrison that had been ordered to die where it stood. The Americans took the top, and then the Japanese came out of the tunnels behind them. If a man who refused to carry a weapon walking back into that is the kind of history you want told properly, subscribe to Storied Past and stay with me. Because what Desmond Doss did next is, quite simply, the most extraordinary thing one human being did in the entire Second World War. The order came down. Fall back. Get off the ridge. Everyone went for the ropes. Doss looked at the wounded, still lying up there in the smoke, and he stayed. He was alone on top of that cliff, with an enemy hunting through the smoke for anything still moving, and he had nothing to defend himself with. Nothing at all. He crawled. He found a man. He dragged him, sometimes hauling a body heavier than his own across open rock, all the way to the edge, and there he did the thing that made him a legend. He had taught himself a knot years earlier, tying up patients, a simple bowline sling. He looped it under the wounded man's arms and legs, ran the rope around a shattered tree stump, and lowered him 100, 200, 300 pounds, 35 feet down the cliff face, hand over hand, until the men below could catch him. Then he turned around and crawled back into the smoke. Again and again. His hands were raw to the flesh. His arms had nothing left. Every time he reached the edge, he was certain it was the last one. And every time he prayed the same words, "Lord, please help me get one more." For roughly 12 hours, he did that. Alone, unarmed, under fire. When it was over, the army counted the men he had lowered down that cliff. They put the number at 100. Doss, embarrassed, insisted it was 50. They settled on 75. 75 men went home to their families because a soldier who would not touch a gun refused to leave them behind. Some of them were the same men who had beaten him. The war was not finished with him. Weeks later, a grenade landed among his legs. He took the blast, treated his own wounds, and lay there for 5 hours before anyone could reach him. They finally got him on a stretcher, and on the way out, Doss saw a man hurt worse than he was. He rolled off the stretcher and told them to take the other man first. While he waited, a sniper's bullet shattered his arm. So he splinted the broken arm with a rifle stock, the only time in the entire war Desmond Doss ever touched a weapon, and he used it to save himself, and then he crawled 300 yards to the aid station. In all of it, he lost the small Bible his wife had given him. When his unit heard, those men, the ones who once called him a coward, went back out and searched that battlefield until they found it, and they sent it to him. On the 12th of October, 1945, Desmond Doss stood on the White House lawn, and President Harry Truman took his hand and would not let go. Truman told him he considered this greater than being president. He became the first conscientious objector in American history to receive the Medal of Honor. He never made $1 from it. He turned down the money, the films, the fame for decades. Tuberculosis took a lung and 5 ribs. The treatment took his hearing. He lived quietly in the hills of Georgia, a soft-spoken man with a ruined body, until he died in 2006 at the age of 87. He had gone into the worst war in human history and never fired a shot, never took a single life. He only ever gave them back. A boy once stood in a poor Virginia house, staring at a picture of one brother killing another, and asked how a man could ever do such a thing. He spent the rest of his life answering that question. On a cliff, in the smoke, with a rope in his raw hands, whispering the only prayer he had, "Lord, please help me get one more."